In the shadowed spires of Dracula's castle, where moonlight rarely pierced the perpetual gloom, a child was born of two worlds. His name was Adrian Fahrenheit Ţepeş, but the world would come to know him as Alucard, a name forged from the reverse of his father's own, Dracula. This reversal was more than a linguistic curiosity. It was a prophecy in itself, a sign that the son would walk a path opposite to the father who ruled over darkness. To understand Alucard's vision of a world without night, we must first trace its roots to the blood that flowed in his veins, the tragedy that shaped his soul, and the quiet promise whispered by his mother as she burned at the stake. The idea of a world bathed in endless light did not spring from a naive desire to banish shadows. It emerged from a profound understanding of what darkness truly is. Not the absence of sunlight, but the absence of mercy, the corruption of faith, and the cycle of vengeance that had plagued humanity and vampires alike for centuries. Alucard's dual heritage as a dhampir, half vampire, half human, made him an outsider from the moment of his birth. His father, Count Dracula, was no mere monster. He was once Matthias Kronkvist, a man twisted by grief and betrayal into a being of unquenchable rage, a ruler who sought to wrap the world in darkness as a blanket for his pain. His mother, Lisa, was a human woman of extraordinary courage and compassion. She dared to love a vampire, to see beyond the curse that clung to him, and to dedicate her life to healing the sick and the suffering. It was Lisa who taught Alucard to value humanity, not for its perfection, but for its capacity to love, to hope, and to grow. She showed him that light is not a birthright but a choice, one that even those touched by darkness can make. "Do not hate humans for their fear," she told him when he was still a boy, her hands gentle as she brushed his hair back from his face. "Fear is a shadow, but shadows cannot exist without light. Be the light that guides them, not the darkness that consumes them." These words would echo in Alucard's mind for centuries, a guiding star in the endless night of his existence. The tragedy of Lisa's death at the hands of the Church marked the moment Alucard's vision began to take shape. The Church, which claimed to be a beacon of light, had condemned Lisa as a witch simply for loving a vampire and for practicing medicine that saved lives. They feared what they did not understand, and their fear turned to violence. As Lisa burned on the cross, her final words were a plea to both her son and her husband. To Alucard, she begged for forgiveness, for him to never let hatred harden his heart. To Dracula, she whispered a warning, a plea to not let his grief turn to vengeance. But Dracula's heart was already consumed by darkness. He swore to destroy humanity for the murder of the woman he loved, to turn the world into a realm of eternal night where fear and suffering would reign. Alucard, torn between his love for his father and his devotion to his mother's memory, made a choice that would define his entire existence. He would stand against Dracula. He would fight to protect the very humans who had killed his mother. And in that fight, he began to envision a world where such tragedies could never happen again. A world without night, where fear and ignorance could not thrive. Where the line between human and vampire, light and dark, was not a source of conflict, but of understanding. To fully grasp the depth of Alucard's prophecy, we must look to the literary and mythological roots that shaped the Castlevania universe. Bram Stoker's original Dracula novel, published in 1897, established the archetype of the vampire as a creature of darkness, a symbol of corruption and moral decay. Stoker's Dracula is associated with blackness, black clothing, black horses, a castle with black windows, and his power grows in the night while he is weakened by the sun. As Jonathan Harker notes in his diary upon first meeting Dracula, the Count is clad in black from head to foot, a visual representation of his alignment with darkness. Conversely, characters like Mina Harker are linked to light, described by Van Helsing as one of the lights in a world filled with darkness. This duality of light and darkness is central to Stoker's work, and it is a theme that the Castlevania series expands upon through Alucard. Unlike Stoker's Dracula, who embraces darkness without remorse, Alucard is a being of both light and dark. He has the strength and immortality of a vampire, but he chooses to use those gifts in service of light. His vision of a world without night is thus a rejection of Stoker's binary. It is not a world where darkness is eradicated, but a world where darkness is no longer a source of terror. It is a world where the light of understanding and compassion banishes the shadow of fear. Alucard's early life, though brief, was filled with moments that would later inform his prophecy. He spent his childhood in the relative peace of Dracula's castle, shielded from the hatred of the outside world by his mother's love. Lisa would take him into the villages surrounding the castle, where he would watch her heal the sick and comfort the dying. He saw how humans responded to her kindness, how their fear of vampires faded in the face of her compassion. He also saw the cruelty of the church, how priests would preach against dark creatures while turning a blind eye to the suffering of their own people. These experiences taught him that the true enemy was not darkness itself, but the ignorance and intolerance that allowed darkness to flourish. He began to wonder what the world would be like if everyone could see as his mother did, if they could look beyond appearances and embrace the common humanity that binds all living things. This wonder would eventually grow into a prophecy, a belief that one day the world would be freed from the cycle of fear and vengeance. That night would give way to an eternal dawn. The first time Alucard openly spoke of his vision was during his first confrontation with Dracula in 1450. After Lisa's death, Dracula had unleashed his army of undead upon the world, laying waste to villages and cities alike. Alucard, still a young man but already wise beyond his years, stood before his father in the throne room of the castle. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the walls were lined with the bodies of those who had dared to oppose Dracula. "You seek to cover the world in darkness," Alucard said, his voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. "But darkness cannot last. It is a temporary state, a reaction to pain. My mother believed in a world where light and dark coexist, where understanding replaces fear. That is the world I will fight for. A world without night, not because the sun never sets, but because the shadow of hatred is lifted." Dracula laughed at his son's words, dismissing them as the naive idealism of a half-breed. "You are weak, Adrian," he said, using Alucard's true name as a weapon. "Your human blood has made you soft. Darkness is eternal. It is the natural state of the world, and I will be its ruler." Their confrontation was inevitable, a clash between father and son, darkness and light. Alucard was defeated, but he did not die. Instead, he went into hiding, biding his time and nurturing his vision. He knew that defeating his father was only the first step. To truly create a world without night, he would have to change the hearts and minds of both humans and vampires. As the centuries passed, Alucard's vision evolved. He witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the spread of Christianity, and the continued conflict between humans and supernatural beings. He saw how the church's power grew, how it used fear of the unknown to control the masses. He also saw moments of hope, times when humans and vampires lived in relative peace, when the light of compassion shone through the darkness. These moments reinforced his belief that his prophecy was not impossible. He began to understand that a world without night was not a world without shadows. It was a world where shadows were not feared, where they were seen as a natural part of life. It was a world where vampires and humans could coexist, where the strength of the vampire and the compassion of the human could complement each other. He also realized that his dual heritage was not a curse but a gift. He was uniquely positioned to bridge the gap between the two worlds, to be the mediator between light and dark. In 1476, 26 years after his first confrontation with Dracula, Alucard emerged from hiding to join forces with Trevor Belmont, the last of the Belmont clan, and Sypha Belnades, a powerful mage. Together, they set out to defeat Dracula and end his reign of terror. During their journey, Alucard shared his vision with his companions. Trevor, who had been raised to hate vampires, was skeptical at first. He had seen the destruction that Dracula's army had wrought, had lost friends and family to the undead. But as he got to know Alucard, as he saw the compassion and courage that lay beneath his vampire exterior, he began to believe. "You speak of a world without night," Trevor said one night as they camped beneath the stars. "I have spent my life fighting darkness. I never thought to ask what comes after." Alucard smiled, looking up at the moon. "What comes after is a world where we no longer have to fight, where we can live in peace. It will not be easy. It will require sacrifice. But it is worth fighting for." Sypha, who had studied ancient prophecies, recognized the significance of Alucard's words. She told him of an old legend, a prophecy that spoke of a being of both light and dark who would bring an end to the cycle of vengeance and usher in an age of peace. "That being is you," she said. "You are the one who will fulfill the prophecy. You are the one who will bring the world without night." Their battle against Dracula was fierce and brutal. The castle was a labyrinth of darkness, filled with monsters and traps, but Alucard and his companions pressed on. In the final confrontation, Alucard faced his father alone. The throne room was bathed in blood-red light, and Dracula stood at the center, his power radiating like a black hole. "You still cling to your mother's delusions," Dracula said, his voice booming through the room. "You think you can change the world? You think humans will ever accept us? They will always fear what they do not understand. They will always seek to destroy us." Alucard did not hesitate. He drew his sword, the blade glowing with the light of his mother's memory. "They may fear us now," he said, "but fear can be overcome. Hatred can be replaced with understanding. I have seen it. I have felt it. And I will make it so. I will create a world where no mother has to die for loving someone different. A world where no son has to fight his father. A world without night." The battle was over quickly. Alucard struck the final blow, and Dracula fell, his body dissolving into dust. But Alucard knew that the fight was not over. The physical darkness had been defeated, but the shadow of fear and hatred still lingered in the hearts of humans. To truly fulfill his prophecy, he would have to continue fighting, not with swords, but with words, with compassion, with the example of his own life. In the years that followed, Alucard wandered the world, spreading his message of peace and understanding. He helped humans fight against evil vampires who refused to renounce their ways, but he also defended vampires who were unjustly hunted by humans. He became a legend, a figure of hope for those who sought a better world. He was known as the Vampire Lord of Light, a contradiction in terms that perfectly captured his nature. People would tell stories of him, of how he had defeated Dracula, of how he walked between two worlds, of his vision of a world without night. These stories spread far and wide, inspiring others to join his cause. But Alucard also faced opposition. The church saw him as a threat, a vampire who dared to challenge their authority. Evil vampires saw him as a traitor, a half-breed who had turned his back on his own kind. He was hunted by both sides, but he never wavered. He knew that his prophecy was not something that would be fulfilled in his lifetime. It was a legacy, a seed that he was planting for future generations. As we delve deeper into Alucard's story, we must remember that his vision of a world without night is not just a fantasy. It is a metaphor for a world without fear, without hatred, without the cycle of vengeance that has plagued humanity for centuries. It is a vision that is rooted in his own experiences, in the love of his mother, in the pain of her death, in his struggle to reconcile his dual heritage. It is a vision that has been shaped by the literary traditions of vampire lore, from Bram Stoker's Dracula to the countless adaptations that followed. It is a vision that speaks to the universal human desire for peace and understanding. In the next chapter, we will explore how Alucard's vision was tested over the centuries, how he faced betrayal and loss, and how he continued to cling to his belief in a better world. We will see how his prophecy evolved, how it became more than just a personal goal, but a movement that inspired others to fight for something greater than themselves. For now, we leave Alucard standing at the edge of a new dawn, his sword at his side, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The night is still dark, but the first light of day is beginning to break. And Alucard knows that as long as there is light, there is hope. And as long as there is hope, his prophecy will live on. The birth of Alucard's prophecy is a story of love and loss, of light and dark, of hope in the face of overwhelming despair. It is a story that reminds us that even the darkest night will eventually give way to dawn, that even the deepest pain can be transformed into something beautiful. Alucard's dual heritage, his mother's teachings, his confrontation with his father, all of these elements came together to create a vision that is both timeless and timely. In a world that is often divided by fear and hatred, Alucard's vision of a world without night is a beacon of hope. It is a reminder that we are all more alike than we are different, that we all share a common desire for peace and understanding. And it is a call to action, a challenge to each of us to be the light that banishes the shadows, to be the change that we wish to see in the world. As Alucard himself once said, the world is not divided into light and dark. It is divided into those who choose to love and those who choose to hate. Choose love, and the night will fade away.